Imagine this. You've just risked your hairy butt chasing a wild beast across the plains for 2 days straight. Your toenails are cracked, your loincloth is soaked, and your club's got mysterious goo on it. But victory! You finally bring home 200 pounds of raw meat, enough to make the tribe chant your name in your cave crush batter eyelashes. Life's good for about a day and a half, because by sunrise of day 2, the smell hits. Not the kind of smell that makes you say, the kind that makes your nose curl, your dog run away, and your stomach flip like a mammoth belly flop. That's when it dawns on you. This meat is dying faster than you did chasing it. Welcome to the caveman's greatest post-hunt tragedy. Meat that turns against you. You see, cavemen didn't have fridges, no Tupperware, not even a rock with a lid. And let's be honest, burying meat in the ground only led to 2 things. 1, forgetting where you buried it, or 2, raccoons throwing a midnight rave. Either way, food went bad faster than a blind date with a saber-toothed tiger, so what did early humans do? At first panic, then experiments. Some tried salting the meat. With the 0.0001 grams of salt, they licked off rocks. Others dangled it from trees, thinking birds would guard it like meat angels. Spoiler, they didn't. Mostly they pooped on it. There were even those who tried drying it under the sun, hoping to turn steaks into solar panels. But the sun also brought flies, and flies brought worms, and worms brought regret. A lot of regret. The tribe elders started noticing a pattern. The fresher the meat, the faster the feast.
But if you had too much,
half of it ended up as offerings to the maggots. That's when desperation met observation. One day, a particularly lazy caveman, let's call him Grack, left a chunk of meat hanging near the fire pit. Not in the fire, just close enough to soak in the smoke like it was doing hot yoga. He forgot about it for 2 whole days. Everyone assumed it was ruined, but then someone dared to taste it. Grack didn't die. He didn't even vomit. In fact, he said it was not awful. That was high praise in caveman Yelp reviews. They sliced it, passed it around, and to their shock, the meat was still edible. Tough? Sure. A little burnt on one side? Definitely. But it didn't reek, it didn't slither, and it didn't kill. Cue the Stone Age light bulb moment. Smoke could keep meat from turning into a crime scene, but nobody really knew why. They just knew it worked, like hitting a mammoth in the knee. It didn't matter how, as long as it fell. Soon, every cave had its own meat corner. Tribes started carving out smoke zones, building crude racks from branches and bones. Even the cave kids got involved, inventing smoke tag and who can stay in the smoke longest without crying. Spoiler, it was always the blind kid. The tribe's priorities shifted. They no longer just hunted to eat, they hunted to store. Suddenly, food wasn't just for today. It was insurance. It was power. It was, hey, my cave has beef. Your cave has moss. It also brought drama. With meat now lasting longer, theft became a problem. Rival tribes started raiding each other's smoke pits. There were wild accusations, rock fights, one infamous sausage war, where 3 men lost teeth over a half-burned goat leg. Still, the idea stuck. The caveman brain, though often preoccupied with fire and farts, had stumbled upon preservation. Primitive, yes, but revolutionary. Instead of watching precious protein turn into a maggot disco, tribes could stretch their bounty over days, even weeks. Of course, not everything was smooth. Cavemen being cavemen, some got cocky. One genius tried to smoke fish in the same pit as deer. The results? Let's just say the tribe invented food poisoning that night. But mistakes aside, the age of smoked meat had begun. In one corner of the world, while other humans were still figuring out how to throw a rock straight, Grack and his crew were turning their cave into a 5-star smokehouse. No aprons, no recipes, just trial, error, and the growing knowledge that maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't have to eat rotting meat ever again. Not bad for a bunch of guys who still couldn't spell meat. So now that cavemen had their magical meat-saving fog machine, aka smoke, the next step was obvious. Let's burn everything. And boy, did they. Fire had always been a flex. You weren't really a man until you could make fire without accidentally roasting your beard. Cavemen didn't just cook with it, they worshipped it, danced around it, used it to scare off saber-toothed party crashers. But now, fire was the new refrigerator. Well, kind of. The problem? These guys were better at hitting things than thinking things. So the first attempts at meat preservation looked less like gourmet cooking and more like an episode of Survivor. Ignorance Edition. Take Og, for example. Og thought if a little smoke was good, then a lot of fire must be better. He built a bonfire the size of a small tree. Then, like a proud Stone Age scientist, he held his meat stick, no, not that kind, directly into the flames. 10 seconds later, the mammoth rib was charred blacker than a cave wall. The air smelled like a tire fire. Og coughed so hard he fell into the pit and singed his butt hair. The tribe howled with laughter. Lesson learned: smoke is good, but fire hurts. Soon enough, cavemen realized smoke came from around the fire, not inside it. That meant keeping flames low, letting the wood whisper instead of scream. You needed the sweet spot, just enough heat to scare bacteria, not so much that your jerky turned into a charcoal briquette. Of course, nobody had thermometers. Instead, they used the caveman test. Stick your hand over the smoke and count ugh, 2, 3, until you screamed. If you made it to 5 ugh, the fire was just right. Naturally, the first to figure this out became a legend. Her name was Yara. Yes, her. Don't act surprised. Women had brains too, even in the Stone Age. Yara noticed that when she cooked close to the fire, her meat tasted weird and sometimes burned. But when she hung it just above the smoke, it dried out slowly and tasted better, cleaner, safer. Yara's cave became the neighborhood deli. She designed the first smoke shelf, basically a few sticks tied together with sinew, balanced over a fire like a bad game of Jenga. The results? Heavenly. Her smoked boar could survive for days. Her squirrel kebabs, a local delicacy. Hunters started bringing her meat to preserve in exchange for, let's say, cuddles. Before long, every cave wife was copying her setup. Some even got fancy, adding mud walls to trap smoke longer or building 2 fires to speed things up. One guy made a triple-rack smoker until it collapsed and sent 40 pounds of raw bison flying into the chieftain's soup. He never hunted again, but innovation comes with risks. Sometimes a fire went too strong and roasted the entire setup. Other times, wind blew sparks into the cave and turned dinner into an evacuation drill. There was one particularly dark night when a young couple tried to add herbs for flavor, accidentally threw in poisonous leaves, and gassed themselves out like amateur witches. Still, progress marched on. Smoke became a new kind of magic. Cavemen started adding different woods, each with its own flavor. Pine made things piney. Birch gave a sweet touch. Maple? Oh baby, that one got you date night. Tribes began competing for the best smoke. They ranked each other's dried meat like it was the Stone Age version of Top Chef. Grak's goat jerky got 3 grunts. Yara's smoked eel earned 4 burps and a marriage proposal. One guy tried smoking lizard. He got exiled. The best part? This new fire-smoke combo didn't just preserve meat, it told stories. Every smoked rib was a timeline. The morning hunt, the midday prep, the long night watching embers glow like angry fireflies. Fathers taught sons how to fan the smoke, when to flip the meat, and how to not fall asleep during fire duty. The tribe finally had more than just full bellies. They had tradition. But let's not get too sappy. At the end of the day, they were still cavemen. One night, a tribe in the northern cliffs got too ambitious. They built a smoke hut the size of a mammoth's butt, packed it with meat, then lit a roaring fire underneath. It worked, until the hut collapsed. Half the meat was lost. The other half was launched into the air and eaten by vultures mid-flight. True story, but no one gave up. Why? Because fire and smoke had cracked the code. Meat no longer had to rot in 2 days. No more guessing whether that leg of deer was slightly sour or full-blown gut bomb. Now, they had a plan. It wasn't perfect. There were burns. There were flare-ups. There was that time someone dropped an entire goat into the fire and called it a new flavor. But it was better than nothing. And in the world of cavemen, better than nothing was basically a 5-star review. And so, with smoke in their hair, soot on their faces, and a few third-degree burns, the Stone Age chefs kept going, because in their hearts and stomachs they knew this was more than survival. This was meat, preserved, protected, smoked to perfection. So you've got smoke, you've got fire, you've got enough singed eyebrows to start a fashion trend. Now comes the real question every caveman asked himself after burning a third dinner. Where the heck do we put the meat so it doesn't drop into the flames again? Enter the hanging method. Sounds simple, right? You just hang meat above the smoke. Let it get all steamy and smoky and tough like a caveman's armpit. Easy. Except there was one tiny little problem. Cavemen didn't invent ropes yet. Oh, they tried. Twisting vines, braiding animal guts, even using strips of bark. But everything either snapped, unraveled, or attracted rats. One guy even tried using the tail of a dead lizard to dangle rabbit legs over the fire. Let's just say the results were slippery and ended with someone shouting, "Who put lizard in my bacon?" Then came the brilliant, and by brilliant we mean barely functioning, idea of balancing meat on sticks between two rocks. You'd wedge a stick across the fire pit, lay slabs of meat on top, and pray to the gods of gravity that nothing fell. It worked for about 12 minutes, until the wind blew, or someone sneezed, or the tribe's clumsiest toddler tripped and sent the whole setup crashing into the fire. Meat sizzling, sticks snapping, cavemen screaming, "No!" in unison, like it was the final scene of a prehistoric soap opera. Eventually, someone came up with the genius concept of tripods. 3 sturdy sticks, tied at the top with animal sinew, legs dug into the dirt, meat dangling in the center like a caveman disco ball. Revolutionary, until the day it rained. Water plus, rawhide, slip and slide. One big gust of wind, and down came the meat, the tripod, and half the cave's dinner, face first into the ashes. That night, the tribe dined on soot-covered boar with a side of disappointment, and let's not forget the wildlife factor. Any time meat was hung outside, on trees, over rocks, between caves, it became a free buffet for every forest creature within sniffing range. Foxes, raccoons, birds, even one sneaky bear who somehow learned to stand on 2 feet and pluck ribs like he was ordering at a drive-thru. But the worst was the vultures. Those bald-headed sky demons would circle for hours, waiting for a caveman to blink. The second you turned your back, whoosh, there goes your lunch, flapping off into the sunset with your prized jerky flapping behind it. So the cavemen adapted. They started building elevated platforms, basically wooden towers with meat racks halfway up. These were the Stone Age version of kitchen counters, high enough to keep meat off the ground, low enough to slap a raccoon if it got ideas. But again, there was one problem. Cavemen weren't born engineers. They were born fallers. Climbing up to hang meat became a death sport. Every day someone fell, off the log, into the fire, onto the meat. The tribe even made a game out of it. Guess who falls first? The winner got to eat whatever wasn't stepped on. Yara, our resident cave genius from earlier, saw the chaos and stepped in again. She crafted the first meat tent, a lean-to structure with wooden poles, a smoke trench underneath, and a cloth made from stretched animal skin to trap heat. It wasn't pretty, and it smelled like wet buffalo, but it worked. No more dropped meat. No more bird theft. No more cavemen impaled by falling ribs. The tribe called it the Sky Pit. Others copied it. Some upgraded with 2 levels of racks. Some painted the poles with symbols, believing certain doodles kept flies away. Spoiler, they didn't. But still, not everything was solved. There were logistical problems, like how much meat could you hang without collapsing the rack? One tribe found out the hard way when they tried to hang an entire mammoth quarter. The structure didn't just fall, it exploded. Meat flew in all directions. One piece was found 2 weeks later in a squirrel hole. There were social problems, too. Suddenly, whoever controlled the meat racks had power. Arguments erupted. Fights broke out. One guy tried to bribe his way into premium rack space with 2 shiny rocks and a dried fish. He was politely clubbed. And of course, there were jealousy problems. Tribes without meat tents started raiding those who had them. It wasn't just about meat, it was about technology. Smoke huts became the Apple stores of the Stone Age. But for all the drama, one thing was clear. Meat preservation had leveled up. What started as a messy experiment of hang it and hope became a system. Cavemen had architecture, strategy, even inventory control, aka counting how many ribs you had before and after someone checked on it. Hanging meat may have caused bruised shins, burnt toes, and the occasional collapsed pelvis, but it paved the way for real food security. For once, tribes could hunt less often, eat more safely, and maybe even trade preserved meat for other goods, like tools, furs, or the favor of a neighboring chieftain's daughter, all because someone looked at a burning fire and said, "Hey, what if we didn't drop dinner in there this time?" Progress, people, one bruised caveman at a time. By now, cavemen were getting cocky. They had racks. They had fires that didn't immediately torch the forest. They had meat swinging from wooden structures like primitive chandeliers. It was all going great until someone burned the wrong stick. And let's just say, the results were explosive, not in a good way. It began when Trog, a caveman with more chest hair than brain cells, decided to try out a new kind of wood. He claimed it came from a magic tree that grew near the swamp. "Smells strong, burns bright," he grunted. That night, he used it to smoke an entire wild boar. The next morning, everyone who ate that boar sprinted to the bushes like their loincloths were on fire, eyes watering, guts twisting. One guy tried to throw up through his ears. Even the dogs wouldn't touch the leftovers. That particular meal was later known as the Day of the Cursed Pork. Lesson learned: not all wood is meat-friendly. You see, cavemen didn't understand chemistry, but they definitely understood consequences. Through trial, error, and multiple emergency diarrhea incidents, they slowly began to categorize wood like this. Good wood. Burns slow, makes nice smoke, adds flavor, doesn't kill grandma. Examples: hardwoods like oak, maple, and hickory, though they didn't know the names, they just called them that tree by the cliff that doesn't explode. Bad wood. Burns fast, creates choking smoke, smells like dead bugs, or makes your meat taste like wet socks dipped in poison. Examples: pine, cedar, swamp birch, and anything oozing sticky stuff. The worst offender? Resinous wood. You know, trees full of pitch and sap. Cavemen thought sticky, good, but all that sap did was create toxic smoke. It made your meat taste like pine-flavored failure, and your lungs feel like they'd been clawed by a bear. And let's talk about the smell. Cavemen may not have had adjectives, but they sure had reactions. The wrong wood turned a smoke tent into a funeral home. One tribe near the southern river tried burning driftwood from the beach. The smell was so bad, birds dropped from the sky mid-flight. 2 cavemen passed out before the first rib was done. They buried that smoke tent and never spoke of it again. But on the bright side, these disasters pushed the tribe toward innovation. Yara, the smoke queen herself, once again saved the day. She started collecting different wood types, drying them in the sun, and testing them in tiny batches, one squirrel leg at a time. She even recorded the results by scratching symbols into a rock wall. A happy face meant good flavor. A poop emoji-shaped swirl meant never again. Eventually, Yara and her followers discovered the magic of flavor wood, burning fruit woods, like wild apple, cherry, and plum, created a sweet, gentle smoke that made the meat taste like heaven. Suddenly, smoked meat wasn't just a survival tactic. It was a delicacy, a flex, an art, and with great flavor came great competition. Soon, tribes were bragging not about how much meat they had, but how good it tasted. "Oh, this mammoth jerky?" Smoked over cherry bark with a hint of maple. Food became status, and smoke became fashion. That's when things got weird. One tribe started importing wood, trading furs and tools for special logs from distant forests. Another tribe tried mixing herbs into the fire for smoke seasoning. One guy went too far and tried adding crushed flowers. The meat came out purple. Everyone got a rash, and he was banned from the pit for a month. Then came the wood wars. Tribes started guarding their wood piles like treasure. If your neighbor saw you chopping a tree that made good smoke, you could expect a rock through your window by nightfall. There was even a spy ring, cavemen sneaking into enemy territory to sniff smoke and report back. But despite the drama, the lesson stuck. Good meat needs good wood. Cavemen became wood connoisseurs. They'd tap logs, sniff bark, even taste the leaves. Don't do that. They could tell if a tree was ready to burn by the sound it made when hit with a stick. Thunk meant dry, squelch meant run. Eventually, the tribe developed a simple rule. If it smells like home, burn it slow. If it stinks like toe, let it go. It rhymed better in caveman language, but you get the idea. Thanks to their newfound wood wisdom, smoke tents flourished. Meat tasted better, fewer people got poisoned. And best of all, there was peace. At least until someone tried to smoke a skunk. Don't ask, just don't. So next time you bite into a piece of perfectly smoked meat, remember, it took 1,000 years of trial, error, intestinal disasters, and flaming failures for humans to figure out which trees don't kill you when you burn them, Progress smells like hickory. Mistakes smell like Trog's lunch. Now that the meat was hanging, the wood was chosen wisely, and the smoke was dancing just right. You'd think everything was smooth mammoth sailing. But no, this was still the Stone Age, and if there's one thing cavemen were good at, it was turning simplicity into chaos. Enter the greatest challenge of all, keeping the fire going overnight. You see, smoked meat wasn't a one-hour project. It was a multi-day, slow-roasting, patience-testing, butt-numbing ritual. You couldn't just throw wood on the fire and walk off to chase frogs. The smoke needed to be constant, consistent, controlled, like caveman jazz, so somebody had to watch the fire. At first, they all tried taking turns. Grak watches sunset to moonrise. Yara from moonrise to coldest before dawn. Then Og until rooster screams. Easy enough. Until Grak fell asleep, Yara got bored and wandered off, and Og used all the firewood to make a spear, just in case. That night, the fire died. The meat sat cold and raw, and a bear wandered in and stole half the rack. The next day, the tribe didn't argue. They screamed, and thus began the Great Firewatch Wars. Different shifts, different people, new rules, none of which worked. Nobody wanted to stay up all night tending to smoke and shooing raccoons. It was boring. It was smoky. It was cold. And worst of all, it meant you couldn't flirt around the fire pit or wrestle in the leaves. So they tried incentives. First, they offered extra meat to the watcher, then furs, then a special rock chair carved with a symbol of honor. But no gift could compare to sleep. Cavemen loved sleep. You could offer them a bearskin robe and they'd still say, "Nah, I'll nap instead." That's when Chuck, yes, the village idiot, came up with an idea that accidentally changed history. He said, "Why not make fire smaller and closer to meat?" Everyone laughed, then paused. The tribe realized that smaller fires under the racks, not around them, could burn slower and needed less babysitting. Yara improved it by digging small trenches, wind-blocked smoke channels that let the fire crawl along the length of the pit without roaring. Genius. Now, instead of one big fire that needed constant feeding, they had tiny, lazy fires that smoldered like an old man's pipe. These could go for hours without collapsing, and yet someone still had to check in, just in case, so the job remained. And the drama exploded. The title of Firewatcher became both a curse and a status symbol. At first, it was punishment. You fell asleep on hunting duty, Firewatch for 2 nights. But soon people noticed that Firewatchers got privacy. While the rest of the tribe slept, the Watcher had the smoke tent all to themselves. Quiet. Warmth. Occasionally, leftovers, which led to a new problem: meat thieves in disguise. One night, the tribe noticed something suspicious. They had counted 8 boar ribs hanging, but by morning only 6 remained. Grak blamed the wind. Og blamed ghosts. Yara blamed Grak. So they started sneaking in to spy on the Firewatcher. One night, they caught Trog, the same genius who once smoked meat with pine bark, quietly nibbling on half-cooked squirrel. Busted. From then on, no one watched the fire alone. They had to take shifts in pairs, sitting opposite each other like judges on a meat talent show. One watched the smoke. The other watched the watcher. Still, the temptation was too strong. Smoked meat in the middle of the night? That smell was the original perfume. Cavemen would lie to their own mothers for a bite of brisket at 2 a.m., so the tribe created rules. Rule number 1. No eating during Firewatch. Rule number 2. No touching meat unless you're flipping it. Rule number 3. If meat is missing, everyone goes without breakfast. That last one worked. Nothing motivates honesty like group starvation. But not all drama was about meat. Sometimes, Firewatch became the perfect setting for romance. Picture this. 2 young cavemen sitting side by side, embers glowing, shadows flickering across their rugged faces. One turns to the other and grunts, "Nice rack." They're talking about the meat rack. Of course, probably, one thing leads to another, and boom, baby cave people 9 months later. Firewatch became date night. Meat was the excuse, but sparks flew in more ways than one. That's when elders started assigning only same-gender pairs to the job, to keep focus. But love finds a way. One watcher even faked a snake bite just to swap shifts and sit next to his crush. And then came the night of the great betrayal. One tribe member, let's call him Drog, fell asleep on duty. Not only did the fire go out, but the smoke tent collapsed, and 4 days of perfectly preserved meat got soaked in dew and ruined. The tribe was furious. They didn't kick him out, though. No, they did worse. They made him taste test every new firewood type for a month. If he threw up, they didn't use the wood. If he passed out, they never used the wood again. If he survived, well, they still didn't trust him with matches. Despite all the drama, Firewatch became a respected role. Not everyone had the patience. Not everyone could resist temptation. But those who could, they were trusted, admired, occasionally gifted the first bite of finished meat. And honestly, in a world with no Netflix, firewatching was the closest thing to midnight entertainment. So the next time you smoke a brisket or slow cook some ribs, remember, the reason it's even possible is because some lonely caveman sat up all night, half naked, surrounded by smoke, fighting off raccoons, and thinking about whether someone was stealing the last slice of mammoth bacon. Spoiler, they were. After weeks of fire experiments, meat-dropping accidents, diarrhea-inducing wood smoke, and romantic firewatch drama, something miraculous happened. One morning, the tribe pulled down a slab of smoked deer that had been hanging for almost a week. Nobody really expected much. It was supposed to be used as bait for hyenas, but the piece hadn't rotted. It hadn't molded. It hadn't even gone soft. It was leathery, tough, dry, brown as a sunburned butt cheek. Grack, always the brave one, bit first. The sound was somewhere between chewing bark and breaking a twig. His jaw twitched. His eyes watered. He looked like he was about to pass out from effort. But then, slowly, he smiled. "It's meat?" he gasped. "Meat that fights back." That day, Jerky was born. Now, of course, cavemen didn't call it jerky. They called it grrrk, which loosely translates to thing that lives in your teeth forever. It wasn't juicy. It wasn't tender. But it didn't stink, didn't rot, and didn't crawl away on its own. That was a massive upgrade. The news spread like wildfire. Tribes came from miles away to chew this new marvel. The first few bites always made people doubt their life choices. But once you powered through the first layer, the flavor hit like a club to the brain. Smoky, earthy, primal. Cavemen loved it. Not just because it was tasty. Jerky had superpowers. It didn't spoil, even in the sun. It could be carried for days during hunting trips. It doubled as a weapon. True story. One guy knocked out a wolf with a hardened bison strip. It gave your jaw muscles a workout equivalent to lifting rocks with your face. Suddenly, the weakest members of the tribe, those who couldn't join hunts or carry firewood, had value again. They were put in charge of cutting, flipping, and drying meat. Kids learned to spot crispy edges and dangerous mold colors. Grandparents judged jerky like Michelin critics. Too chewy, needs more smoke, tastes like foot. Production ramped up. Meat wasn't just smoked. It was sliced thin, spread wide, flipped often, and sung to at night. Okay, maybe that was just one guy, but it worked. Tribes built drying racks that looked like jungle gyms for meat. Some had multiple tiers. Some were shaped like sunflowers. One overachiever made a rotating rack powered by a goat on a leash. The goat wasn't happy, but the jerky was amazing. Then came the flavor era. Cavemen started experimenting again. What if we rubbed salt on it? What if we dipped it in fermented fruit juice first? What if we smoked it while dancing? Some of these ideas worked. Some gave people hallucinations and caused one guy to marry a tree. The best flavor combo turned out to be simple. Light smoke. Thin. Cuts. A few secret herbs. Mostly whatever didn't kill the last guy who ate them. Jerky became currency. Tribes traded it for flint tools, shelter, even marriage alliances. One story tells of a chief who offered 3 daughters in exchange for a sack of elk jerky. The daughters declined. They were vegetarians. But with popularity came problems. Jerky theft exploded. You couldn't leave your meat rack unattended without coming back to find a few strips missing. People started hiding jerky under rocks, behind cave drawings, even in their own hair. One man braided dried lizard jerky into his beard and ate it piece by piece during a 3-day hunt. Resourceful, yes. Hygienic, debatable. There were fakes too. Some lazy tribes made jerky out of mushrooms, bark, or worst of all, re-dried spoiled meat. Those who fell for it never forgot. Their stomachs certainly didn't. It sparked the jerky trials where elders had to taste test every batch before distribution. They wore dramatic cloaks, grunted in deep voices, and spat out subpar strips like disappointed cave Gordons. Despite the chaos, jerky changed everything. No longer did tribes have to feast like wild beasts after every hunt. Now they could portion, store, ration. Jerky taught them delayed gratification, a phrase cavemen didn't know but totally lived. And it wasn't just practical. It was emotional. Every strip of jerky was a story, a memory. This one, from the bear I wrestled. That one, from my first hunt with Dad. These weird triangle pieces, my wife cut them into hearts, which is sweet unless you realize she also used a rock knife. Some tribes even began decorating jerky. They'd carve little notches into it, dye the edges with berry juice. One tribe hung theirs from necklaces like trophies, until the dogs got into them. After that, jerky became a necklace-free tradition. But perhaps the most important thing jerky gave cavemen was freedom. They could leave camp without worrying about spoiled meat. They could go on longer hunts. They could survive lean months. They could toss a strip into a pouch and know this will still be here tomorrow. It wasn't just food. It was strategy. It was culture. It was power. And yes, it was painful to chew. Some say jaw muscles evolved faster during the jerky era. You had to work for your meal. You earned every bite. And when you finished a full strip, you didn't just feel full. You felt accomplished. So the next time you're sitting in an air-conditioned room, tearing open a plastic bag of teriyaki beef jerky from a convenience store, just know, it all started with a cave person, a fire, a stringy chunk of deer, and the will to chew through pain. When the first cold winds began sweeping through the valley, even the bravest cavemen shivered. Leaves fell, rivers froze, everything, berries, bugs, birds, disappeared or died. Winter didn't knock. It kicked the cave door down and announced, let's see who's really built to last. And for the first time in caveman history, some tribes were actually ready. Why? Jerky, that tough, smoky, leathery miracle meat, was now the MVP of survival. While snow buried the forests and mammoth tracks turned to ice, jerky waited quietly in leather pouches and clay jars. It didn't rot. It didn't freeze. It didn't complain. It just was. Meat made immortal by fire, smoke, and stubbornness. Before jerky, winters were brutal. Every year, the same sad pattern. Fall ends. Food runs out. Tribes argue. People vanish, and caves echo with hunger. The lucky ones chewed on frozen moss. The desperate ones gnawed on bones and prayed for an early thaw. Sometimes they'd hunt in snowstorms and come back with frostbite and nothing else. But now, jerky changed the script. Tribes with jerky didn't just survive winter, they thrived. Fires burned low. Bellies stayed full. Teeth stayed sharp from all that chewing. For once, people had time to rest, to tell stories, to make new tools, or new cave babies. Winter was basically prehistoric cuffing season. In one legendary tale, the North Ridge tribe was snowed in for 6 full weeks. The sun disappeared. Wolves howled outside, but inside, they passed around strips of elk jerky like gold coins. When spring finally came, they emerged healthier than ever and immediately started trading their jerky for furs and flint. Their secret? A double-layered drying tent, sweetwood smoke, and one slightly obsessive grandma who monitored every batch like a hawk. Jerky became not just food, but infrastructure. Every tribe had a jerky store. Some dug pits lined with stones to keep it cool and dry. Others hung it in secret caves, guarded by the loudest dogs and grumpiest uncles. There were rumors of underground jerky bunkers. One tribe even built a meat vault behind a waterfall, with smoke channels leading from fire pits a mile away. Ridiculous? Yes. Effective? Also yes. But jerky didn't just feed people, it fed stories. Kids were told, this strip came from the beast your father took down in one strike. Hunters passed out jerky before battle. Elders offered it to gods in rituals. One romantic even carved I love you into a strip and proposed. She said yes, then ate it. Jerky became currency. It had value beyond calories. You could trade it for tools, services, even alliances. One chieftain once gave away a prized spear in exchange for a single smoked mammoth tendon. Why? Because it tastes like power, he said. And also because I forgot my wife's birthday. With time, jerky evolved. Some tribes added honey for sweetness. Others packed it with crushed berries or wild nuts. The southern tribes sun-dried theirs into brittle crisps. The mountain tribes made thick, chewy bricks that doubled as insulation. One daring genius fermented jerky with wild garlic and invented stone cheese. It smelled like dragon breath, but tasted okay. Of course, jerky had its limits. Over-chewed strips could chip teeth. Over-cured batches turned into fossils. One time a man cracked his molar and blamed the meat. "Too strong," he grunted. "Meat fight back." The tribe laughed, then chewed more carefully, and not every winter went smoothly. One bitter season, firewood ran low. The smoke tent collapsed. A rival tribe raided the jerky stash and replaced it with dried mushrooms. By the time anyone noticed, half the tribe was hallucinating that the sun had turned into a goat. That winter was called the Great Chew of Confusion. But still, jerky endured, even when people didn't. There are ancient cave drawings that show this. A lone survivor by a tiny fire. Snow all around, gnawing on a strip of something brown. A mammoth skull beside him. His tribe, gone. But he lived, because jerky doesn't spoil. It doesn't freeze. It doesn't quit, and that was the legacy. Jerky wasn't just meat. It was hope. Hope that food could last. That cold could be beaten. That even when everything else failed, your bow broke, your fire died, your best friend fell through the ice, there'd still be something in your pouch. A piece of survival. Tough, smoky, ready. Modern folks think they invented food prep. But cavemen? They smoked meat with no clocks, no thermometers, no stainless steel. Just wood, fire, instinct, and the will to never starve again. So next time you tear into a bag of store-bought jerky on a road trip, remember, you're not snacking. You're honoring tradition. Thousands of years of burnt fingers, smoked huts, midnight meat thieves, and grandma-guarded drying racks. Also, you could choose something that lasts longer than your patience. Because in the Stone Age, meat didn't just feed the body, it kept the soul alive.